Hello, I'm Tim Johnson, CEO of the California Rice Commission. Our grower meeting this year is virtual, and this is the first in a series of presentations designed to bring this year's meeting directly to you. I look forward to seeing you again next year. We are pleased to present Jim Wiesemeyer of Pro Farmer, arguably one of the most recognized speakers on politics and agriculture. Jim will speak about what the election meant and what we should expect to see out of Washington, D.C. as a result.
I certainly wish I could be there, but we're into this pandemic, but there is hope for the future because it looks like summertime. The vaccines will be implemented and maybe we can all get together at various meetings at that time. Here we go. After the election, Dems win a trifecta. Now, by a trifecta, I mean they won it all. And I'll have implications of that. President Joe Biden. He is not a moderate. He is a liberal. Vice President Kamala Harris, as most of you know, is a liberal. The Congressional Quarterly, which I respect in Washington, D.C., it's bipartisan, labeled her the most liberal Democrat in the Senate the last Congress. The House has the tightest margin since 1945. I'll have implications of that later. And the Senate is 50-50. And whoever controls the White House, in this case, the Democrats, the vice president breaks ties. That's Kamala Harris. So all sorts of implications here. Now, a trifecta, as I said, means the individual party, in this case, the Democrats, control the White House, House, and the Senate. Now, this is how President Obama got his Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, if you will, and how President Trump got his tax cuts. So big changes usually happen, and they will again. Now, there's a odd name thing called budget reconciliation. I don't want to get too wonky for you, but that just allows an administration to use budget reconciliation where they only need 50 votes. And that's what they'll use if it's tax related. So tax reform and climate change will be put under that, and also COVID aid. So, this is a signal to you that big changes are coming. The Biden White House, the cabinet, Treasury Secretary, I want to start with first because Janet Yellen is the former Reserve chairwoman, Federal Reserve chairwoman. She's going to be Treasury Secretary. That's going to be important. She's a very smart lady, but that tells me she may not want to have increases in taxes, which Biden wants and the Democrats want, until later. That doesn't mean they won't offer it, but I don't think they're going to take place right away. Tom Vilsack is returning as USDA secretary. He knows the corridors at USDA. He is a very good friend of Joe Biden. So that's going to become important. I personally think that, Vilsack is going to be a transition USDA secretary because I see him in an even higher position in the Biden administration later on. I won't even rule out chief of staff later on. Catherine Tai is the U.S. Trade Representative. She comes from the Hill. She used to be in the U.S. Trade Rep's office, so she knows trade policy. She speaks Mandarin Chinese fluently. And when she worked at the U.S. Trade Rep's office, her focus was on China's enforcement of their World Trade Organization commitments. So I'll have more on trade policy later, but she's going to be important. Executive orders. Biden's going to abolish or try to abolish most of President Trump's executive orders, but more than a few of them will be taken to court. That's the litigious society or litigious society that we're in. So he may not win all of his challenges to Trump's executive orders, but this shows you that when you want a policy change, it's far better to come from Congress, codify it into law, as opposed to executive orders that both President Obama used and President Trump used. We're going to have more regulations. I call it re-regulation. One of Trump's signature issues was that he lowered the number of regulations, which I think was a positive for not just the ag sector, but the overall business community, the banking system, et cetera. He used the rule that if a regulation cost more than the benefits of it, he wouldn't do it. Let's hope that President Biden has the same rule. Okay. Issues, COVID-19, I can bottom line that is, when will these vaccines be distributed enough and working enough that we can get back to whatever the new normal is? Because it's going to have a major number one issue, short term here in the US, both from agricultural markets, overall financial markets, our freedom to finally get around and to network, and our way of life. It's going to be key. Infrastructure, we're finally going to get it. The will is here now. I know President Trump wanted infrastructure, but the Republican-controlled Senate could never agree on a funding mechanism. I think they're going to do that relative to, budget reconciliation. There's that term coming back in again. You're going to have another speaker on climate change, but I'll just bottom line climate change right now. From all my talks with, farmers and ranchers, they know climate change is coming. They want a seat at the table, and I think that's good for farmers and ranchers. They better be at the table. This could be the next revenue stream for the business of agriculture if it's done right. But farmers are very leery about this, and they should be. We have to see what type of carbon credit trading system there will be. Will all those farmers who have done best practices for years, such as no-till farming, will there be a legacy payment for those? Will the program be voluntary rather than mandatory? These are some of the things I'm hearing from farmers. Healthcare is always an important issue for a Democrat, and it is for Biden, because think of Obamacare. Immigration, President Biden has said that he's going to do some immigration changes day one in office. Okay. January 20th is the inauguration. First day in office that they really start working is January 21st. So look to that. Other policy issues that I'll be going through: farm, food, trade, energy I've already handled, maybe deal with ethanol in a little bit, and tax policy. So here's my bottom lines. The Senate agenda was fixed with Georgia when the Democrats won both political races. Stabenow, Senator Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan, returns as the chairwoman of the Ag Panel. Now, you rice growers know, Debbie Stabenow. You dealt with her. I will tell you this, the bottom line, she usually gets what she wants. And if you think you're going to roll her, you won't. She has a very aggressive staff, some of whom will come into USDA. And with other new leaders in the House Ag Committee, I think she's going to have an upper hand for the next few years. We have Bernie Sanders, the socialist independent, at the Budget Committee, so think lower defense spending. Wyden from Oregon will head up the tax writing committee, committee in finance. He wants to significantly increase capital gains. That's going to impact more than a few producers. Sherrod Brown from Ohio will head up the banking committee, but watch one of his members on, one of the subcommittees on banking. Senator Elizabeth Warren. She wants to look at the financial community regulations, et cetera. And I think between banking and Dick Durbin from Illinois at Judiciary, you're going to have a focus on antitrust concerns, including the business of agriculture, especially in the meat processing industry. Will the Democrats, as many of them said, want to do away with the 60-vote rule? That's the filibuster. Will they pack the Supreme Court? So because they were so upset the way Trump handled the Supreme Court, getting 3 Supreme Court justices, and will the Democrats create 2 new states for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico? If they do, you're going to have at least 3, if not 4 more Democrats in the Senate. Well, there's a Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia. He's going to have so much power because he has already said he will not vote to end the filibuster. We'll see if he follows through on that. And he doesn't want to pack the Supreme Court. So anything you hear or read about Joe Manchin, pay attention to. He doesn't have much history on ag policy. I did a little digging on that. So, but he is a moderate to conservative Democrat, and if there's such a thing. Focus on the Democrats' climate change, transportation, and healthcare. That echoes what Biden wants. The Republicans are going to be led by, in the Senate Ag Committee, John Bozeman from Arkansas. He's going to be the ranking person on the Senate Ag Committee. I know him. I've talked to him several times. We've had him on our AgriTalk, program. He's a facilitator. He's a compromiser. He's a good listener. So I see, and of course, he knows rice, industry issues, and I think that's a big plus right there. He's not an ideologue. So I think that's a solid indication. Senator Chuck Grassley, a longtime Republican from Iowa, is timed off the finance panel. Unless he gets a waiver, that means Mike Crapel from Idaho will be the likely new ranking member on the finance panel. I always mention the finance panel because that's tax writing, and that's where about over 60% of all the important issues in Washington, go through. The House. Colin Peterson lost his race in Minnesota as the Democrat by more than expected. I think it was more than 20 points versus Michelle Fischbach. The next House Ag Committee chair is David Scott, a Black American from Georgia. He has already said his focus is on racial justice. I want to stress this now. I am already hearing that he may want to get extra data from farm program payments and also the crop insurance industry to see who gets the subsidies, by what class of farmers, etc. So this, I think, is going to be very important in the months and 2 years ahead. The Republican ranking member on the House Ag Committee is G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. We've had him on AgriTalk program. He's very gregarious, again, open-minded, and I think you as a rice group can deal with him. He's a very good listener. The next one I want to talk about is an end of a ban on earmarks. Now, earmarks used to be used a lot in the past. They're currently banned, but they're coming back in the House. Now, what an earmark is a lawmaker can target specific funding, and it usually happens in transportation bills, that they can specify funding to a particular county or region in a state. And actually, I'm in favor of the return, because as long as it's not abused, because this helps lawmakers come to yes in voting on particular bills. So watch this, for your state, to see whether or not there's targeted funding for not just transportation, but other issues. I think it's a leadership change in the House that they are going to do. The Senate probably won't go along initially, but I see pressure building to end the ban on earmarks in the Senate eventually. Now, the next wonky term I have for you is pay-go. That's being ended in the House. Pay-go is when you have spending for certain bills, it must be offset by budget cuts elsewhere. But in the House Rules Committee, which has already passed this, they ended pay-go for COVID relief, for climate change, and infrastructure. Again, the question, will the Senate follow? What I just told you is the Democrats are going to spend a lot of money in the next few years. Important lawmakers, moderate Republicans in the House and far left Democrats in the House. Why do I say that? Because we've got the lowest margin in the House since 1945. So these groups, Nancy Pelosi as a House Speaker is going to have to compromise, believe it or not, in order to get any legislation passed. First, she'll go to her own party, and then she'll try to seek some moderate Republicans. In the Senate, I've already said Joe Manchin is a kingmaker, but Chris Coons from Delaware is a Democrat, very good friends with Joe Biden. When you read about, Chris Coons or listen to him, pay attention, because he's going to help Biden broker what Biden wants in the Senate. So he's very important. John Tester from Wyoming is a populist who can be hard to judge sometimes. So I think he'll have a say in a 50-50 Senate. The Republicans to watch out for is Susan Collins from Maine, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and Mitt Romney from Utah. So watch those, because in a 50-50, you're going to have some maverick, senators who could go another way. So this is where Chuck Schumer, who will be the Senate Majority Leader, will have to go to. And also those Republican senators up for reelection in 2022. There's 20 versus 14 for Democrats. So they're going to be very cautious in what they, vote for in the next 2 years. Direct payment. This is COVID aid package. Now, there's going to be an initial attempt, and I think they'll eventually get it, to get to that $2,000 check for COVID. We think it's going to be $1,400 additional dollars to go on top of the $600 that we saw late last year. In fact, December 21st, when it was passed by the Senate. But the timing of this may take longer than most people think. The reason is that the ongoing impeachment battles with Trump again, and some controversial issues relative to what Biden wants in the package, such as billions and billions of dollars of aid to state and local governments, including California, New Jersey, and Illinois. Republicans don't like that because they think that too much of an aid to state bails out states that have run roughshod over their budget discipline. Food stamp funding additional funding will be added to any COVID aid package. The Democrats always, there's no funding level too high for a Democrat relative to food aid. I'm not against food aid. It's been very good for the business of agriculture, but it's a sensitive issue on the degree of funding. CFAP 3, that will be unrolling when you're hearing this, and other aid. Will we get another, COVID aid package? That depends, because we've had surging prices in agriculture, and I'll have more on that later. WIP Plus is finally being implemented by the USDA. This has been one of the worst rollouts of any program I've seen in over 40 years, both from the quality issues in the program versus the WIP Plus, but all of the payments have been funded now. And they've been authorized to be paid. So if you're in this program and you still haven't got any payment, it's been authorized, no matter what your FSA office may tell you. The U.S. economy, you always have to look at this economy. And then, as I said at the beginning, vaccine implementation is key, because renewed lockdowns have been a drag. I don't think I have to tell California this. But I will tell you the upbeat news that this thing's going to uncork some spending eventually. The savings rate in April was 33%. Americans don't usually save nearly that much money. And in the summer quarter, it ended at 14.3%. What does that mean? You've got funding for the pent-up demand. So those savings could be unleashed if the conditions return to whatever is going to be normal in the future. I'm not going to go through all these, but these are bottom lines on what I've been told by experts on the U.S. and global economy. And being in California, you want to know what the U.S. and world economy is going to be. The central bank, our central bank, and other central banks around the world, that's the Federal Reserve in our country, they remain very favorable. That means, soft money. World economic growth in 2021 from the World Bank's estimate is 4%. We had a 4.3% contraction downturn in 2020. Now they're saying if the vaccine is widespread, we're going to have 4% growth. That 4% is key because in my history of watching the world economy, when you're at 4% or greater, is you up the odds of a demand pull markets. And in agriculture, demand pull markets are the best because they're more sustainable. US economic growth should top 5% by the fourth quarter of this year if some of these things that I've already talked about unfold. The jobless rate is going to go down. It was 6.7% at the end of the year. It should be just a little over 5% by the end of the year. Watch your 10-year Treasury yields. They could end the year close to 1.5% to 1.8%. They're just over 1% now. That's called reflation. We're not going to have too high inflation, but it's something traders are looking at. Mortgage rates are going to rise about 3.5%. They're just around 2.7% currently. Transportation is beginning to be a key, and it's reflected in container rates around the world. So that's trade going on. The more COVID aid and stimulus dollars are helping the U.S. economy. We've seen the curtailing of outdoor dining with the arrival of winter. And as I said, inflation is on the rise, but the Federal Reserve has already said it's going to let it run above the 2% target. It's well under that right now. So they're going to let this economy run. The U.S. ag economy, again, bottom lining here, working capital. The decline, we've had a tremendous decline, horrible decline in working capital, cash flow, if you will, with the recent surge in prices, with soybean prices near $14 and probably going to hit 15 before this thing's all over, if not higher. And corn prices, $5, perhaps going to $5.50 or so. That has stemmed the decline, but that doesn't mean agriculture is in heaven. Far be it. You don't come out of a working capital drain in 1 year of a bull market. Government payments made 36.7% of farm income last calendar year. That's not good, but thank goodness taxpayer money was available. Meat processing plants. You always look at the meat sector and overall agriculture because of the feed component of those animals. They're getting back to capacity, but you always worry about a COVID virus hitting a major meat processing plant. Food service industries, as I keep saying, will take longer to return. They've had a horrible run of things since the pandemic. U.S. farmland prices, it looks like they're looking at net farm cash income on the rise. Government, payments are still going to be there because they've already made a little over $13 billion in CFAP 2 payments, mainly last year, but we've got CFAP 3 payments still to be made. So that's going to help bolster farm income. So we're not going to see the drain in net farm income this calendar year that we thought just late last year. And COVID-19 is an impact on farmland values. On farm and food policy, when you look at the Biden administration's initial advisory panels and USDA appointments, there's one topic that comes out at you: climate change. It's not a question of if, it's when and how it's done. Again, you're going to have a speaker on that. Watch the National Farmers Union, because any time a Democrat's in, they gain clout. Will the ag panels be bipartisan? I hope so. The next farm bill debate, it's going to begin, but I think you're going to have maybe regional hearings by the end of the year, but that's about it. Crop insurance, I always am asked this question. It still has bipartisan support, but look at the lawmakers we have lost with the last year's Congress and the retirements. Pat Roberts from Kansas, Mike Conaway from Texas, and Colin Peterson from Minnesota. Collectively, that's 85 years of experience. You're not going to replace that. So for crop insurance, watch appropriations battles, the next farm bill, and eventually when Congress deals with debt reduction. They're not going to deal with debt reduction in the next 2 years, even though Republicans have suddenly found their fiscal awareness again, but they weren't there for the last 4 years. USDA's Commodity Credit Corporation Charter Act is, some think it's USDA's ATM machine. So you're going to have a focus on USDA's, CCC. Food policy, I've already said. Food stamps, more funding. Food labeling, that handles a lot of stuff in California, GMOs and things like that. That's going to come back to the forefront. I've already said there's going to be an antitrust review. So watch that. I don't think it's a question of if, it's when they do some antitrust in the ag sector. Tax policy, I've already said Yellen is going to temper the timing of tax increases, but they're going to go up. Corporate taxes, I don't think they're going to go up as high as President-elect Biden initially said he wanted. High incomers will see their taxes increase eventually. Those making 400,000 or more. Capital gains is going to be a battleground because that could really hurt the economy if they do some of those increases that some Democrats want. The estate tax, big issue in some portions of agriculture. More than a few Democrats, including Biden, wants to go back to the past. That's going to be an issue. Agriculture loses this exemption for the estate tax in the year 2025. Like-kind exchanges, if they alter them, that's going to have a big negative impact on farmland value. So watch like-kind exchanges. Trade. It's not going to be the initial focus of Biden. He's going to call for a study of Trump trade policy, so minimum 6 months on that. And that's probably good, to do. I've already mentioned Catherine Tai as the U.S. trade representative. She knows China. Reports say that China wants to renegotiate the phase 1 agreement. That's not going to happen. Biden is going to work more with his allies relative to China. And China is going around the world trying to reach trade agreements by region or by individual country. World Trade Organization, President Trump threatened to leave, never left it. Biden wants to reform, and it should be reformed, but that's going to take quite a long time. Trans-Pacific Partnership, Trump left that the third day in office. Biden wants to rejoin, but that's going to take time. Look for Japan's leader to be the first official overseas to meet with Biden. And Japan wants the U.S. to come back into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or whatever it's called right now. New trade agreements, Trump favored bilaterals 1-to-1, which wasn't a bad approach. Biden's going to be more flexible. Bilateral, if that's the case, multilateral if he has to. Fast track or trade promotion authority on the lower left, TPA, that expires July 21st. So that's going to be a very sensitive issue to get that extended. I've underlined Cuba trade policy because that's important for rice industry interest. In the waning days of the Trump administration, they announced that Cuba was a sponsor of terror. Now, that's going to make a hurdle for the incoming Biden administration to reestablish relations with Cuba the way the Obama administration did. I don't think it's impossible, but it may postpone some of the renewed relations between the U.S. and Cuba. The House Democrats are watching the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, USMCA, which is the replacement for NAFTA, and that could get you into some battles on your commodities going to both countries. So watch it. There's already a blueberry problem with Mexico that could come back to haunt U.S.-Mexico trade relations. You're going to have another speaker on climate change, so I'm only going to talk on one subject here. The personnel, John Kerry, used to be Secretary of State. He's now the energy czar as it pertains to international. Gina McCarthy, who was Obama's EPA administrator, is the domestic climate change czar. Michael Regan is the EPA administrator, comes from North Carolina. He dealt with the hog industry down there, and he's a listener. He's a coordinator. That's a good thing. Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, was a joint venture specialist, so at least she knows markets. And the only other change I want to point out to you is the coming age of electric vehicles, despite the biofuels industry trying to deny it. President Biden will eventually get funding to put in 550,000 battery charging stations throughout this great country. It's not going to happen overnight, but you're going to see the continued progress in the purchases of electric vehicles. Why do I bring that up? The Renewable Fuel Standard Program, which is the holy grail for a corn producer, the RFS mandate is based on gasoline consumed. Well, do the math. If you have an electric vehicle, you don't use gas. So eventually, the renewable fuel standard, of whose authorization ends in 2022, is going to have to be changed. And I'll let your other speaker address to that. Future elections, we're almost done, and then I want to take some questions. The party that controls the White House, in this case the Democrats, usually loses some congressional seats the first midterm elections, in this case in 2022. Obama lost 63 House seats and 6 Senate seats in 2010. Bill Clinton lost 8 Senate seats and 54 House seats in 1994. The Republicans' gains in the House on November the 3rd sets up an opportunity. Election year experts, that's me, I don't listen to election year experts because they were horrible. That at least increases the Republicans' opportunity to control the House after 2022 because of the slimmest House majority since 1945. The Senate 2022 races, again, have way more Republican seats than Democrats, 20 to 14. What I think is going to happen is the Democrats are going to control the Senate the first term of Biden. Democrats are going to focus on GOP Senate seats in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. In 2024, will Donald Trump run again? The other question, will he be able to? Last one that I want to go through, geopolitics. Any president is always tested their first year in office. And that could come from whomever. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Israel, to see how he's going to be working with Iran. So watch that. More and major cyber attacks. We had a major one late last year that's going to take a while. So this country better get serious on cyber attacks. A black swan. We didn't see COVID-19 coming. Will there be another dastardly event? Civil unrest, and I say this not pleasingly at all, in the U.S. and other countries. We're not the only country going through the emotionalities that this country is going through right now. Senate change. Will there be a flip? Will Manchin flip to become a Republican? I don't think he has to. He's got his vote. Will there be a death in the Senate? We're on death watch. Either political party can change it. And there's more than a few old lawmakers. Biden's health. Again, I don't want to get too much involved in this, but only perspective. His first day in office, he was older than Reagan was when Reagan left the White House. And my line has always been, all great men are dead, and I don't feel well myself. So you got to watch his health. And overall in agriculture, if African swine fever or another disease or virus comes to North America, watch out. Now that's my formal presentation. Now I'm going to answer or try to answer some questions that have, come in. And it's always the case, if we don't get around to your individual question, go through your Excellent Rice group and they can forward me through the email your particular questions or email me directly. One of them was, and I'm reading here, what will be the approach for the Biden administration when it comes to retaliatory tariffs in place by China, India, and others? Well, that can get involved in the steel and aluminum tariffs and the $325 billion in tariffs between the US and China. Biden's going to be very careful about lifting those right away. Reason? That's leverage for him. We have to find out what President Biden wants from China to lift the tariffs. And I hope that we'll have a more lenient policy on tariffs when it comes to our traditional allies. But again, as I said in my formal presentation, Biden's going to be cautious on trade, and he should. And he's going to study what worked and didn't work under Trump's trade policy. The other question, another one that I got in, is what's my thoughts on monetary policy? Now, monetary policy is Fed policy on the value of the dollar under a Biden administration. That's a good question. I think the market's being lulled to sleep here because I bet 90 out of 95 analysts that I've read or talked to on the dollar says it's going to trend lower this calendar year. They may be right. But go back to what I said before under this pent up demand and the savings and the vaccine. If I tie all them together, the second half of this year, we're going to have potentially 5% or higher GDP. And if that carries over, then the bonds are going to be a factor in the marketplace. So real interest rates are going to go higher. Not enough for the Fed probably to increase interest rates this calendar year, but I think the Fed's going to start increasing interest rates sooner than after 2023, which they said last year would be the case. When you have higher interest rates, you have a higher dollar. So I would watch the flow of the bond market, and I would watch the US economy relative to the dollars that's going to come in liquidity, especially the second half of this calendar year. Okay? Again, email me any other questions or comments that you may have, or questions on topics I did not cover. Thanks again.